Hey everybody, it's a beautiful January day out here today, and actually it's very hot sitting on top of this compost pile. And I don't normally sit on my compost pile, but that's where we had left off on the last episode, where we were talking about compost as being one of the main amendments to your soil. So now I'd like to continue the series of amendments that I had started and go on to what I consider would be somewhere around the second amendment, and that would be mulch. Now, I wanted to show you the top of my compost pile because using compost as a mulch, I wanted to show you what was going on in the compost that would make it such a good mulch. So come a little closer and I'll show you what's on top. Take a look around and you can see all the microorganisms that are living in this compost. Now we have some little, what I used to call pincher bugs, some red wigglers that I had put in here last year, pill bugs, they're escaping pretty quick, and I've got some regular just red worms, and there's just some regular ground worms that have gotten in there. Oh, centipedes. We have just an abundance of different things in the compost pile. When you add this to your garden as a mulch, all this comes along with it, and it works into your soil in your garden bed, and it starts creating a healthy organic biosphere in your garden. Well, besides compost being a mulch, let's go inside because I have some other things gathered together that you can use as mulches, and we'll talk about those. Welcome back to my garage, which is a lot cooler than it was outside on that compost pile. I want you guys to come closer because I've got some buckets of mulch. Now I'm doing a little series on amendments, and when I speak of mulch as an amendment, maybe a new gardener wouldn't think of mulch as being an amendment. You might think of it as something that you just put in your garden bed, over the top of your garden boxes or around your plants. And actually it is an amendment. So I'm going to bring you a little bit closer so you can see the mulches that I have brought inside, and I'm trying to keep them contained so that I don't make a mess. So if you don't mind talking to the hands, I'm going to show you a few of the mulches that I have around my yard that I can use anytime I want to. Let's get these over here and we'll talk about straw. Now, straw is a fairly good amendment. One thing about straw is if you need it in a smaller size, you can always cut it up with an old pair of scissors. And these are garden shears. I got them in the garden section at Home Depot. And they're perfect for cutting anything up in the garden. They're really strong, and if you want your straw to be smaller, you can definitely cut it up if you want to. Now, there are several things about straw that you might not want to use it as a mulch. One thing is it's easily blown away, and if you mix it together with your topsoil around your plants, it's going to start using some nitrogen out of your soil because it's going to start breaking down. Now, I do use it in my garden, but just in certain areas, and we may head back outside and I'll show you where I use it in the garden. Sawdust is another great mulch to use in your garden. I stay away from it personally because it's so small, it gets compacted down in your garden. It actually becomes hydrophobic because it's so small, it gets pushed down, and you don't want to work it into your soil just like the straw because it's going to start using the nitrogen in your soil and deplete your nitrogen and other amendments. And the other thing with sawdust is it might contain any number of things because you don't know where the sawdust came from. Now, this sawdust that I bought for my chicken beds, and it could have come from cut up plywood, and the plywood has glues that hold it together. It could come from any number of sources. I don't mind using it with my chickens in the beds or around on the ground to help soak up moisture, but I don't use it in my garden beds. Now, these are just things that I do in my garden that you don't necessarily need to do. You do what you want to do in your garden. Pine needles. Pine needles are actually a really good mulch to your garden. If they're fresh, they will contain some different terpenes, which are just, you know, the pitchy stuff when you get your hand up against a pine tree, or if you pull some fresh pine needles off of a tree, it makes your hands sticky. But these are dried out, and they're from in front underneath a pine tree that my neighbor has. And these would be perfect to put down. As the pine needles mix together, it will hold itself down. It'll become matted. I'm trying to go through these fast because I've noticed that my videos are getting a lot longer than they used to be. So I'm trying to talk a little bit faster, and then I will give you a paper that you can look at later, and you can even print out, and I'll show you that. Dried leaves are one of the best mulches that you can use. And I wouldn't use these dried leaves because they're whole. What I'd probably do is mix some grass clippings with them, maybe go over them with a mower a couple of times and chew them up so that they're not whole leaves, so that they're broken up by the mower, and they're mixed with the grass clippings, which has a lot of nitrogen. So as these break down on your garden bed, they will use the nitrogen in the grass clippings, and they won't deplete your soil that much. So let's get over to wood mulch. I love wood as a mulch, and this is wood mulch. It comes in different sizes. You can buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's. Any kind of nursery will have wood mulch. Now, wood chips, one of my very favorite things to put in the garden and my garden bed are wood chips. As they start to decay, they bring in fungus, and the fungus will start growing down into the soil and into what they call the rhizosphere, which is just the area where the roots of the plant are growing. And that fungus goes down in, and they start working together with the roots. And when we go back outside, I'll show you what the wood chips in my yard are doing. And bring in the 2 nitrogen-based mulches that I have. And the first one, which is one of the best, is compost. And this is the apartment compost that I've been making for the last couple episodes. I've been making a pseudo apartment compost inside the house to see how difficult or how easy it would be. And it's been breaking down really well. And I would say it's just about almost 4 weeks now in the compost process. So it's breaking down really well. You can tell it's getting nice and dark, and it's a rich humus. And I would put this down in my garden beds probably at this point. It's going to keep composting, and it'll provide some really good microorganisms into the soil, not to mention the nutrients that are in here. Grass clippings are the other nitrogen mulch that I brought in today. And grass clippings are fine as long as you use them in a fairly thin layer on your garden beds. If you get too thick, then it's just going to get kind of slimy. As you water your garden, it'll start to just compact and get a really kind of rancid smell. It'll start smelling like ammonia, and it'll get slimy and kind of yucky. So if you're going to put it on your garden beds, just a very light coating, so those would be fine to use as a mulch. With compost, is if you're going to put any kind of mulch down, if you have compost, it's always a good idea to put a layer of compost down on your garden bed or in your garden boxes. Just a light layer would even do, to act as a buffer between your soil and the carbon-based mulches. The compost is going to add that nice, rich layer that will add microorganisms. It will actually inoculate your soil. Inoculate it with microorganisms and fungus and bacteria. So if you had compost, that would be a really good idea. One of the last things that I have as a mulch is newspaper. And I use newspaper a lot as a mulch. I cover the garden bed completely with newspaper, moisten it down, throw a little bit of soil or compost, something on it to help hold it down. And then when I go to plant my transplants, I just make a little hole in the newspaper, the moist newspaper, and put my seedling or my transplant into that hole. And that has really provided a really nice barrier in my garden beds between the soil and the plants, and has helped to keep the moisture in the ground so that they don't have to be watered as much. I just wanted to make sure that I showed you a handout, and I'm going to put it in a link below that you can click on, and when you bring it up you can go ahead and print it out. It just basically lists what mulches are, and then I have listed different types of mulches under carbon-based, nitrogen-based, and inert. And then after I make something like this, I just put it in my garden binder. I've got several things, some from the composting videos that I did. There's one at the bottom of that. From the composting video that I had made, there's one beneath that you can print out. And then there is one from Mulches, and you can go ahead and print that out. And if you have a garden binder with some sheep protectors, it's a really good idea to have something like that around, because then you can go back to that if you've forgotten something or there's some information you've printed out off the internet. You can keep it in your binder, and it's really easy to get to. And then on top of that, you can always put different things that you've done in your garden from year to year, and just kind of keep track or keep a diary of your garden. Well, those are the mulches that I have inside, so let's go out and see what the mulches are doing.
Well, I hope this
yard.
is in focus. I know that I got pretty close down to the wood chips. You can see that the fungus is starting to grow. Anything that you see white here is either just the sun shining on the wood chips or fungus. The wood chips we moved back to this particular area of the garden were put somewhere between 4 and 6 inches deep. And I haven't moved them at all, so let's see how much of the wood chips have broken down. Well, I'm starting to hit soil because there's a rock. So I would say it's down to about 2 to 3 inches now, where it used to be 4 to 6 inches. And it's starting to create a really nice composting mulch underneath. And the garden that I had back here last year, it just grew like crazy. Now this area back here last year was a squash bed. And I did have one tomato, which was a Cherokee purple. And this one in particular that you see I've torn out and just piled up, letting the leaves fall and decompose into the ground. It was 12 feet by 12 feet when I finally pulled it out of the ground.
I think if I had one thing to put down as a mulch, it would be a living mulch, like this nitrogen bed, like this cover crop that I've put down. But by all means, don't let any of your soil go just bare. If you do anything at all, let weeds grow. I know that sounds crazy, but if you have the finances to be able to buy cover crop seeds, buy some legumes and plant them, do something with your bare soil so it doesn't get eroded away by wind and rains, so the topsoil doesn't get washed away, and along with a lot of your nutrients. A cover crop is a perfect thing even underneath your vegetables that you're growing. If you don't have some kind of a mulch to put down, go ahead and try and find something that you can plant that would be a low-growing ground cover if you can't find a mulch. I'm going to bring you in close because I want to show you what's going on under the cover crop before I cover it up with something like straw or compost. I'll be pushing this over and covering it up. And I want to show you what's going on, though, below the ground before I do cover it up. So I'm going to bring you really close.
Okay, let me get this pulled up, and we can see if we can find any nitrogen nodules underneath. And all they are, oh, here's a whole grouping of the little nitrogen nodules right here. And I don't know what plant they're coming from,
But if you see that on my fingertip, I hope that's coming in, and I hope it's in focus. Those little nodules right there are those little nitrogen nodules that I was talking about. So what you normally do on a cover crop with this nitrogen is you till it into the soil. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to let it, I'm going to let it stay the way it is. I'm just going to push it over and cover it with either hay, compost, maybe even some moist newspaper first before I put the compost over. I've already started covering up my cover crop with straw, and I think that's what I'll put down is 2 or 3 inches of straw, and then I think I'll probably throw some worm castings or some compost on top of this, and or I may just leave it for Sherlock to play in. I don't know. But that's what I'll do here. And, you know, stop it. What are you doing? I hope you guys learned something today about mulches. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And, oh, you're getting straw all everywhere in your hair. This is Sammy. And she really gets dirty. Well, I hope you guys learned something today about mulches. Like I had mentioned before, don't forget the little document down below. If you want to print that out, I had made a list of the different mulches and... What? Was it something I said? I made a list of all the mulches, carbon, nitrogen, and inert, but I left a few blank spaces underneath those mulches for you to fill in with your own mulches that you may use or come across, or things that I haven't even thought of. Go ahead and write those in there. So I don't know, if you want to use that, go ahead. That's what it's there for. Until I see you next time, and we'll discuss the next amendment on my list, which you'll find out what that is then. Then I'll be talking to you guys later. Bye-bye. See you guys. Come here, Goofy. Come here, Goofy. Hey, come here. Sherlock, what are you doing? Bye, you guys.